My name is Isabelle Hartley. I'm 30 years old. And this is the story of how my sister stole my husband while I was giving birth to our daughter, and what happened when she came back begging for my help. If you ask me when this story really started, I wouldn't say it was the day I gave birth, or even the day I caught them together. It started long before that, years before, back when we were still kids. You see, my sister Camille was born only 13 months before me, but it always felt like she was years ahead in everything. Or maybe it was that she needed to feel ahead. Better. Bigger. More. As children, everything I did, Camille did too. Except she had to do it louder, faster, and more perfectly. If I won a medal in a school race, Camille had to train harder and win first in the next tournament. If I got praise for a drawing, she suddenly became obsessed with art and painted something deliberately grander. She didn't just want to shine, she needed to outshine me. First, I thought it was just sibling rivalry. But as the years passed, it turned into something darker. One day when I was 14, I won a statewide poetry contest. I remember how proud I was holding that little gold plaque, how my mom, Elaine, hugged me so tightly. I placed the plaque gently on the living room shelf that evening, beaming with the quiet pride of being noticed. But by the next morning it was cracked down the middle. Meshed. No one had to tell me who did it. Already knew. Camille sat at the breakfast table, chewing cereal, eyes blank like nothing had happened. That was the moment I began to understand. This wasn't just envy. It was hatred, cloaked in sisterhood. Camille never got better, only more calculated. When therapy didn't work, when my parents' well-meaning gifts of matching necklaces or attempts at sister bonding only ended up in the trash or screamed back in their faces, they stopped trying. Instead, they tried to manage her, contain the damage. I learned to be quiet, to keep my joy private. If I loved something, I kept it a secret, because Camille always found a way to poison it. By high school, she had mastered the art of slow sabotage. She didn't break my trophies anymore, she broke my friendships. If I got close to someone, she'd flirt with them, pull them in with her magnetic charm and cutting wit. Soon they'd forget I even existed. Camille had a way of making you feel like being liked by her was a privilege, and being liked by me was just ordinary. So I disappeared into books, writing, solitude. I started a blog during senior year. Just a small space to reflect on things I couldn't say aloud. It was called Isabelle's Little Lantern, and to my shock it grew. People liked my words. They felt seen. Small businesses sent me free candles, planners, and one day, even a hand-knit sweater. I didn't brag. I didn't post about it. But someone did. One of my friends reshared my blog on Facebook. And of course Camille saw it. The next dinner, she slapped her phone down and sneered. "People actually read your diary nonsense? What is this, 2003? I didn't respond. I'd learned silence was my only shield. A week later, Camille launched her own blog. Camille Unfiltered. And it looked suspiciously familiar. Same fonts, same layout. Even the way she reviewed a ceramic mug was lifted word for word from one of my older posts. But hers lacked heart. People knew. Fizzled. Mine kept growing. And that's when Camille really began to unravel. She started throwing tantrums when she didn't get her way, again. Not in private but publicly, dramatically. The day my acceptance letter to Ridgewell University came in, the Ivy League school our mom once attended, Camille wasn't just furious. She was livid. She'd applied too, but when her rejection came, she broke a vase and screamed that I stole her future. When I told my parents I'd been accepted, they tried to break the news gently to her. But Camille didn't even let them finish. She screamed across the dinner table. "She's not Ridgewell material. If I didn't get in, she shouldn't have either." And stormed out, door slamming like a gunshot behind her. I left for Ridgewell a month later, shoulders heavy with guilt I hadn't earned. But at least I had space. At least I could breathe. It was there I met Nathan Cross. Nathan was calm, warm, deeply observant. He didn't interrupt or overshadow. He listened. And not because he wanted to respond, but because he genuinely cared. We met while volunteering at a fundraising gala for Jasper, his younger brother who had Duchenne muscular dystrophy. That was the first thing that drew me in. Nathan's loyalty. His fierce, quiet love for his family. I didn't expect him to fall for me. I didn't think I was the kind of girl someone like Nathan chose. But he did. For 3 years we dated. Through college stress, internships, late-night calls, family deaths, Nathan became my home. When Jasper passed away, it broke something in him. But in that brokenness he turned to me and said, "I don't want to wait anymore. Let's get married. Now." So we did. Nothing fancy. Just a backyard ceremony, fairy lights, quiet music, and Jasper's empty wheelchair at the front row, adorned in his favorite blue scarf. I thought it was the most sacred moment of my life. I was wrong. Camille didn't come. She texted me the night before, accusing me of stealing her moment, calling me a selfish parasite for having a wedding before her. She said I'd used Jasper's death as a stage to leap ahead. I should have blocked her then. I should have known this woman, my own sister, would never wish me joy. But I was naive. And I believed stupidly that if I kept being kind, one day she'd love me back. A year after the wedding, I found out I was pregnant. Nathan cried when I told him. He held my belly every night like it was a miracle. We named the baby Lila before she was even born. I was sick most days, too weak to do anything but sleep and vomit, but Nathan was attentive. Or so I thought. The night I went into labor, everything moved too fast. Called Nathan 3 times. No answer. My mom, Elaine, rushed me to the hospital. Between contractions, I clutched my phone like a lifeline. But it was my mom who saw the message first. Her face turned to stone. "What is it?" I rasped. She didn't speak. Just handed me the phone. There it was. Text from Camille. Photo. Her and Nathan. In bed. Naked. Twine. The message read, "Happy motherhood, Isabelle. He's mine now." The scream that came out of me wasn't human. My mother gripped my hand, horrified. Nurses rushed in. Pain tore through my body, not just from labor, but from betrayal that shattered every bone in my soul. Nathan answered the phone on the 4th ring. Almost bored. "I'm sorry," he said. "She was there when you weren't. After Jasper. I needed someone." And just like that, the man who once promised to protect me stabbed me where I was most vulnerable. But even as the pain took over, even as my daughter emerged into this world through gasps and tears, I made a silent vow. They would not break me. Not now. Not ever again. I barely remember the moment Lila was placed on my chest. My eyes were swollen from crying, my body shaking from the trauma of both labor and betrayal. But I do remember one thing, her eyes. Clear, unblinking, and somehow already knowing. She didn't cry. She looked at me like I was the only thing in the world that mattered. And in that moment, I made the first real decision of the rest of my life. I would live. Not just breathe, not just survive, but rebuild. For her. For Lila. The days after the birth were a blur. I was discharged from the hospital 2 days later, stitched and bruised, with a daughter in my arms and a silence in my phone that echoed like a void. Nathan never came. Not to the delivery room. Not to the hospital. Not to see his daughter. What he did do, however, was transfer a small sum of money to my account with a subject line that read, "For diapers and stuff." Like he was sending cash to a casual acquaintance, not the woman who carried his child. My parents were livid. My father, Richard, wanted to go to Nathan's apartment and drag him out by the hair, in his words. But I asked them not to. I didn't want drama. I wanted clarity. I wanted to erase the storm that had flooded my life, not stir up more thunder. I needed control, something I hadn't felt in months. So I did the only thing I could think of. Filed for divorce. I walked into the lawyer's office on a chilly Tuesday morning, holding Lila in a soft beige blanket and trying not to cry as I told a stranger about how my husband had abandoned me on the day our daughter was born. The lawyer, a kind woman named Priya, didn't flinch. She'd seen it all. But she did one thing that surprised me. She looked me straight in the eye and said, "You are going to win. Not just this case. Your life, Isabelle." That was the first time I'd heard someone say I could win anything since it all fell apart. We built our case brick by brick. Texts, photos, Camille's gloating messages, screenshots from months back. A paper trail of betrayal, negligence, and moral rot. Nathan barely responded to any notices. When he finally showed up to the mediation meeting, he looked gaunt, like guilt had worn him down, but his arrogance was still intact. "I want joint custody," he said flatly. I almost laughed. He hadn't seen Lila since she was born. He hadn't asked about her weight, her feedings, her sleep schedule. He didn't even know her middle name. When the mediator asked him what kind of relationship he hoped to build with her, he shrugged. "I don't know. She's a baby." Priya didn't even have to say anything. The court granted me full custody in the first session. Nathan was allowed supervised visits once a month. And even that felt like a gift he hadn't earned. Afterward, I sat on a park bench outside the courthouse with Lila curled against me. My parents flanked me on either side, silent. We watched the orange leaves flutter to the ground around us. And for the first time since everything had collapsed, I allowed myself to exhale. But peace was short-lived. Camille didn't vanish after the scandal. She made herself louder. She posted pictures of Nathan on her socials, called him my love and the future father of my miracle. Yes, she was pregnant. With his child. I didn't react. I didn't comment. I didn't feel anything. Or at least I told myself I didn't. I had built a wall of numbness around my heart, not to protect it, but because I no longer trusted anyone to hold it without crushing it. My parents, however, were done pretending. When they found out Camille was carrying Nathan's child, they called a family meeting. Everyone was there, uncles, aunts, cousins. It wasn't a trial. It was an excommunication. Richard stood at the head of the table and said it loud, without trembling. "Camille is no longer part of this family. Her name will be removed from the will, from the trust, from our hearts." Elaine, my mother, cried silently beside him. Not because she disagreed, but because she had already lost her daughter long before this moment. And there was nothing left to grieve. I didn't attend that meeting. I stayed home with Lila and read her a picture book about rainbows. And while her tiny fingers gripped mine, I felt something deep inside shift, like I was finally coming home to myself. Nathan, as expected, faded into the background. His visits were robotic. He'd come to the community center where supervised visits were held, sit stiffly across from Lila, ask about her diaper habits, and then leave 20 minutes early. She was too young to understand why the man with her eyes never held her the way Grandpa Richard did. But I promised myself she would never feel unwanted. Never question her worth. Not like I did for all those years. I poured my heart into being her mother. Into every 3 a.m. feeding, every lullaby sung with cracked lips, every rocking chair creak in the still of night. And slowly, something beautiful started to grow where everything else had burned down. My strength. I applied for a job at a small digital media company in downtown Greenville, the same town I had moved back to with my parents. They loved my blog. In fact, the hiring manager remembered Isabelle's little lantern. I was offered a full-time writing position on the spot. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady. It was mine. I hired a nanny named Nina Tran, a sweet 23-year-old early childhood education major who adored Lila from the second they met. With Nina's help, I could go to work, come home, and still have energy to be with my daughter. We baked cookies. We sang Disney songs. We danced around the living room in pajamas. Our apartment was small, but it pulsed with laughter and light. And yet, sometimes when I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling fan spinning in the dark, I'd wonder, did Camille ever regret it? Did she ever feel the weight of what she'd done? I didn't ask. I didn't reach out. I didn't need closure. But closure, as I learned, has a way of finding you whether you want it or not. It came on a Monday afternoon, right after I'd picked Lila up from daycare. My phone rang. Unknown number. I nearly declined it, but something inside me hesitated. Answered. Isabelle, it's Camille. The world stopped. My breath caught. My chest went tight. My fingers curled around the steering wheel like I could squeeze the hurt out of my bones. "Please don't hang up," she said, her voice cracking. "I know I have no right. But I'm pregnant. It's Nathan's. And he told me to get rid of it. He doesn't want the baby. Have no one. Mom and Dad won't speak to me. You're all I have left." I sat in that car for a full minute in silence, the hum of the AC and Lila's soft humming from the back seat the only sounds I could hear. I closed my eyes and whispered into the receiver. "You left me at my lowest. You destroyed me. And now you want me to carry you." Camille sobbed. I didn't wait for her answer. "I don't hate you, Camille," I said. "I just don't care anymore." And with that I hung up. The silence after I ended that call was heavier than any scream Camille had ever thrown my way. But unlike before, it didn't crush me. It didn't leave me shaking or doubting myself. Just like the soft click of a door closing behind you for the last time. That night I didn't cry. I didn't feel guilt or triumph. I simply held Lila in my arms while she slept, her tiny breaths brushing against my skin. She was warm, innocent, untouched by betrayal or bitterness. And I promised her again, like I had that night in the hospital, I would protect her from all of it. In the following weeks, life returned to its rhythm. Work, playtime, storybooks. Nina would send me photos during the day of Lila finger painting or toddling through the grass, her hair wild and free. I started smiling again, real smiles. The kind that came from deep in your chest and left you breathless. I even found myself laughing with coworkers, going for coffee runs, feeling almost like the version of myself I was before Nathan and Camille pulled the rug out from under me. But my past, as always, lingered like a shadow. I learned from my mom, Elaine, that Camille had given birth to a baby boy in a quiet hospital on the outskirts of town. No visitors. No Nathan. No flowers or celebration. Just Camille, a tired nurse, and a newborn who hadn't asked for any of this. My mom had gone to see the baby, not Camille. She made that distinction very clear when she called me. "I went for the child," she said softly, voice thick with exhaustion. "Not for her." She described the little boy. His downy black hair, his wide, curious eyes. "He looks like Nathan," she whispered. "But quieter. Gentler." I stayed quiet on the other end. "She begged me to forgive her," Mom added. "She cried the whole time. Isabelle, she looked like a stranger. And I couldn't. I didn't answer. Not because I didn't understand, but because I understood too well. Camille had never once said sorry to me. She had never once admitted what she'd done, or the damage she'd caused. Her call that day hadn't been about remorse. It had been about desperation. And I refused to build a lifeline for someone who only saw me as a safety net once their own selfishness set fire to everything else. My father never even entertained the idea of reconciliation. He removed every photo of Camille from the house. Her room was turned into a playroom for Lila. Her name was gone from the family group chat. Erased, as if she had never existed. Some nights I felt the weight of that. Because Camille wasn't a stranger to me. She was my sister, my childhood rival, my tormentor, my mirror. She knew my fears before I ever spoke them aloud, and I had once loved her so deeply I would have thrown myself into a fire just to earn one kind word from her. But now she was simply gone, and I was still here, alive, stronger, fiercely independent. I poured myself into therapy. Dr. Tessa Monroe, my therapist, was a small woman with steel in her spine. She didn't coddle. She didn't speak in riddles. She looked me in the eye one day and said, "You keep waiting for an apology from someone who's never going to give it. So stop waiting." Hit me like a thunderclap. I hadn't even realized I was waiting. But I was. For some final moment. Breakdown. Letter. A call where Camille would say, "I'm sorry I ruined your marriage. I'm sorry I shattered your trust." But Tessa was right. That day would never come. And I had to stop letting the absence of it hold power over me. Lila turned 1 that spring. We had a small birthday picnic in the park. Just my parents, Nina, a few of my coworkers, and one of my neighbors who had become like family. Lila giggled the whole time, clapping icing-covered hands, squealing as she ripped open boxes of colorful books and blocks. I watched her run across the grass, chubby legs wobbling under her, and something inside me cracked open. The sunlight hit her hair just right and she looked like a living piece of joy. That was the moment I stopped waiting for life to feel like it used to. Because the truth is, it never would. And that was okay. What I had now was better. It was mine. That night, I sat on my tiny balcony with a warm mug of tea and finally opened the folder Nina had handed me the week before. Inside were design drafts, business templates, and a proposal for me. Nina had a vision. She wanted to open a small digital content studio. She knew photography, editing, and social media. I had writing, branding, and storytelling. Together we could launch something real, something ours. The old me might have hesitated, might have been afraid of failing. But this version of Isabelle, she'd already lost it all. She had nothing left to fear. I called her that night. "Let's do it," I said. And just like that, Lighthouse Creative Studio was born. A place where women could build something from scratch, tell stories that mattered, and never ever apologize for taking up space. It wasn't just about making money. It was about reclaiming my voice. Meanwhile, Camille's silence stretched longer. My mother told me that she had moved in with a friend on the outskirts of town, barely getting by. Nathan never appeared. Never called. Just wired the court-ordered child support every month like it was a Netflix subscription he couldn't cancel. The irony was poetic. Camille had won the man. And yet she had lost everything else. I thought I would feel more pity perhaps, satisfaction. But all I felt was distance, like watching a drama on TV that used to keep you up at night and now just feels outdated. One morning, as I walked into our small studio to meet Nina for a new project shoot, I caught my reflection in the glass. I didn't look tired. I didn't look sad. I looked like a woman who had come through hell and kept walking. I pressed a hand to the door and whispered to myself, "We're doing it, Lila. We're making it." The first few months of running Lighthouse Creative Studio felt like learning to fly with homemade wings. Scary, exhilarating, and completely unpredictable. Nina and I worked out of a shared space above a coffee shop that always smelled like cinnamon and ambition. We had no investors, no cushion, just raw talent, late nights, and a shared refusal to ever go back to being silent. And somehow it worked. Word of mouth spread. Local brands reached out. We started helping women-owned businesses polish their presence, telling their stories through stunning visuals and heartfelt writing. Our calendar filled up faster than we expected. Every client we helped felt like one more brick in the wall I was building around my new life. Sturdy, warm, and utterly mine. Meanwhile, Lila thrived. She learned to say mama and no in the same week, and used them both with alarming frequency. She began to dance, to make up stories with her dolls, to giggle when Grandpa Richard made up silly songs or when Grandma Elaine taught her how to fold origami birds. I would lie awake sometimes listening to her sleep, her tiny breaths the soundtrack to everything I'd rebuilt. And then, one evening, a familiar name showed up in my inbox. Nathan Cross. No subject line. Just a name I hadn't seen in over a year. For a full minute I stared at it. My hands shook. My heart didn't race though, it thudded, slow and deliberate, like it was reminding me, "You're not her anymore. You can handle this." Click. It was short. "Isabelle. I know I've been a terrible father. I know I don't deserve a second chance. But I'd like to see Lila again. Not in a supervised setting. Just a walk in the park. Please consider it. I want to do better. Nathan." I stared at the message for a long time. Not because I didn't know how to respond, but because I did. The past version of me would have spent days analyzing every word, wondering if this was real remorse or just another performance. But now I trusted something deeper, my instinct. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I scheduled a session with Dr. Monroe. I laid it all out, the message, the nerves, the memories. She looked at me, calm and measured. "What are you afraid will happen if you say yes?" "That he'll hurt her like he hurt me," I whispered. That she'll look into his eyes and see something to love. And then one day he'll vanish again. Tessa nodded. You can't control who Lila chooses to love. But you can control who you allow into her life. On your terms. Your boundaries. So I wrote back. Nathan, I appreciate the message. I'm not opposed to you being part of Lila's life. But we'll start with a park visit, with me present. No unsupervised time. No sudden drop-ins. One step at a time. Isabelle. He agreed. We met on a Sunday afternoon at Greenville Commons. Lila wore a yellow sundress, her curls wild, her laughter louder than the birds in the trees. Nathan showed up in a navy button-down, hands in his pockets, looking like a man trying too hard not to look broken. He brought a small stuffed bunny. Lila took it politely, said thank you, then ran back to the swings. She didn't cling. She didn't recognize him. She treated him like one of the friendly strangers who sometimes helped her tie her shoes. Nathan sat beside me on the bench, silent. After a long pause, he said, She's beautiful. You've done an amazing job. He nodded. She's everything. I wasn't ready, he added. When Camille told me she was pregnant, I panicked. I didn't love her. I thought I did. But it wasn't real. It was grief. And guilt. And you were right. I failed. I kept my eyes on Lila. She doesn't need you to say all that to me. She needs you to prove it to her. I want to try. Then show up. Consistently. No excuses. No disappearing. You get one chance. He nodded. And for the first time in a long time, I saw a flicker of humility in his eyes. The weeks that followed were tentative. Nathan came by twice a month. He brought books, built block towers, slowly learned how to braid hair badly. But he didn't push. He didn't pretend to be the hero. He just showed up. Meanwhile, Camille resurfaced. This time not with a call or a message, but a letter. Handwritten. Folded into an envelope with no return address. It showed up in my mailbox on a rainy Tuesday, slipped between a grocery flyer and a coupon for lawn care. I stood in my kitchen, Lila playing in the other room, and opened it. Isabelle, I know I am the last person you want to hear from. And I know I've said I'm sorry before, but this isn't about apologies. It's about acknowledgement. I did terrible things to you. I envied you for so long I forgot how to love you. I thought if I could take what you had, I'd finally feel whole. Instead, I lost everything. I'm not asking for your forgiveness. I'm just asking you to know I was wrong. Deeply, unforgivably wrong. My son, Caleb, is the one good thing in my life. He's why I keep going. Maybe one day they'll meet. Not because we're sisters, but because our children deserve better. Camille. I sat down at the kitchen table, the letter shaking in my hands. I didn't know what to feel. Anger, pity, closure. But as I looked out the window, rain drizzling against the glass, I realized I didn't need to feel anything. Camille's words didn't change my life. They didn't undo the damage. But they were a mirror. Not for me but for her. And for the first time she seemed willing to look. That night I tucked Lila into bed and whispered, You're safe. You're loved. And no one, not blood, not pain, not the past, can take that away. She murmured something half asleep, her little hand clutching my shirt. And I knew then I had broken the cycle. Whatever came next, I was ready. I kept Camille's letter in the back of my drawer, tucked under old baby photos and drawings Lila made with crayons. I didn't respond. I didn't mention it to my parents. Some part of me knew that Camille wasn't reaching out to rebuild a relationship. She was reaching for a lifeline in a world where everyone had let go of her hand. But I had already chosen where my hands would go, wrapped tightly around my daughter, around my work, and around the version of myself that had emerged from the ashes. The old Isabelle might have been tempted to crack open the door again. This Isabelle. She knew that some doors were meant to stay closed, locked, and bricked over. Still, the letter had stirred something in me. Not regret, but a deeper sense of finality. I had survived the fire Camille and Nathan lit beneath my life. And now, I was thriving in the home I built from the ruins. Lighthouse Creative Studio kept growing. We launched a podcast series, started a mentoring program for high school girls interested in media, and were even invited to speak at a Women in Business panel in downtown Greenville. Every step felt like reclaiming another piece of the voice Camille had tried to silence. And then came the twist I didn't see coming. One morning, I arrived at the studio to find Nina pacing with her phone in hand. She looked up, startled, and held out the phone to me. "It's from Channel 9 News," she whispered. "They want to feature you." I blinked. Me. They said they read your blog, saw the studio's rise, and want to do a local spotlight. Single mom turns betrayal into business empire. That kind of angle. I laughed softly, in disbelief. But beneath the surface, a deep, warm pride began to rise. That night, I told Lila during dinner. She clapped her hands and shouted, "You're gonna be on the TV, Mommy." Then she leaned in seriously. "Do you get a magic cape too?" "Something like that," I said, smiling. The interview was scheduled for a week later. When the crew arrived, 2 cameras, a producer, and a soft-spoken journalist named Danielle, I was nervous. But Danielle quickly put me at ease. She didn't ask invasive questions. She asked real ones. "What kept you going?" she asked at one point, her voice gentle. I looked at Lila, who was busy showing a crew member how to draw a cat. "Her," I said simply. She reminded me I had something worth rising for, even when I didn't believe I could. The interview aired 2 days later. I thought it would go mostly unnoticed. A small segment in the middle of a local broadcast. But by morning it had gone semi-viral. Shared on parenting forums. Picked up by a couple of women's empowerment pages. People flooded the studio's inbox with kind words, stories of their own, and even offers for sponsorships. And then came a message from someone I hadn't heard from since the divorce trial. "Nathan, I saw the interview. Cried. You were right. About everything. I'm not trying to step back into your life. But I want to thank you for taking care of our daughter. For giving her the kind of strength I never had. I'll keep doing better. Promise." I read it 3 times. Then closed it. It wasn't a grand gesture. It wasn't enough to erase what he had done. But it was something. A glimmer of growth. A piece of closure I didn't know I needed. A few weeks later I got another message. But this one was different. It came from a private law firm in Charleston. A name I didn't recognize. The subject line read, "Hartley Family Estate. Legal Update." I felt a familiar chill run down my spine. I called the number listed, and a polite assistant patched me through to an estate attorney. Her voice was calm, professional. "Ms. Hartley, we're updating the execution of your grandfather's trust, and it appears a revision was made 6 months ago. Your name has been moved to primary beneficiary. All land, property, and associated revenue from the Hartley farmland, about 200 acres, will pass to you upon the final transfer this month." I was speechless. "But I thought, wasn't Camille?" She hesitated. "Originally, yes. But your parents petitioned a revision due to family developments. I believe they submitted a statement of disinheritance for your sister." I sat there stunned. Camille had always assumed she'd inherit everything. The land, the house, the Hartley legacy. It was the unspoken truth in our family, that she was the firstborn, the rightful heir. I'd never questioned it. I hadn't even wanted it. Till now. Now it felt poetic. The land wasn't just real estate. It was where we built tree houses as kids. Where I once buried a music box after Camille broke it. Where my mother taught me how to press wildflowers into notebooks. It held ghosts and roots. And now it was mine. When I visited it a week later, I brought Lila. She ran through the fields, arms wide like a little airplane, giggling as the wind kissed her cheeks. I stood there, on the land Camille always believed would be her throne, and I felt calm. I didn't want revenge. I didn't need to shove it in her face. The fact that it was me standing there was revenge enough. I called my parents that night. Elaine wept. Richard's voice cracked as he said, "We just wanted to give you something Camille never did, recognition. For who you are. For what you've endured. You earned it, Isabelle." And I believed him, not just because he said it, but because I finally felt it in my bones. This wasn't a handout. This was my victory. I didn't announce my inheritance on social media. I didn't flaunt it at the studio or even mention it to Nathan during his brief visits with Lila. The land wasn't about proving anything anymore. It was about peace. About having something no one could take from me. Something rooted. But as word tends to travel in small towns, it didn't stay secret for long. One afternoon I stepped out of the studio to grab coffee, and there she was, Camille, leaning against a silver sedan parked across the street. Her arms folded. Her hair tied up in a bun, eyes hidden behind oversized sunglasses. But I recognized her instantly. The curve of her chin, the tilt of her mouth when she was trying not to look desperate. I froze mid-step, heart lurching into my throat. I hadn't seen her in person since. Everything. She stepped forward slowly, removing the glasses. "Isabelle," she said. I didn't answer. "Can we talk?" "No," I said without flinching. "There's nothing to say." "I heard about the land," she blurted, the words too fast, too forced. Course she had. I stared at her. This woman who once shared my toys, my secrets, my blood, and now looked like someone I wouldn't recognize in a crowd. Her eyes were glassy. Her voice wavered. She was thinner, paler, like life had been chipping away at her. "I'm not asking for it," she said. I need to understand why. Why they gave it to you. Why they erased me. Why?" Echoed. "Do you really need to ask?" She flinched. "I made mistakes," she said, her voice rising in pitch. "But I was hurting too." "You weren't hurting, Camille," I snapped. "You were cruel. You took my husband while I was in labor. You sent me a picture of it like it was a trophy. And now you want to stand here and talk about inheritance." She looked down ashamed, or at least good at pretending. "Caleb's growing," she whispered. "He's walking now. He asks about his family. About you. About Grandma and Grandpa. And I don't know what to tell him. I don't have anything left, Isabelle." I stood silent for a long time. The wind brushed past us, cold and dry, like it knew how brittle this moment was. "You made your choice," I said finally. "And I made mine. I built a life from the pieces you smashed. And I'll protect that life, with everything I've got." "I'm not asking for you to forgive me," she said quickly. "Just, maybe one day. Maybe Lila and Caleb could know each other." Lila and Caleb. I felt something twist in my gut. A part of me longed to say yes. Not for Camille but for the children. For the blood they shared. But I couldn't forget the image of myself screaming in that hospital bed. Or the photo that shattered my trust. "Not now," I said. "Maybe not ever. That's the cost of what you did. You don't get to burn the bridge and then ask to cross it again." She nodded slowly. Her lips parted like she wanted to say more, but she didn't. She turned and walked away. I stood there long after her car disappeared. That night, I held Lila longer than usual. She was growing fast, her legs longer, her questions deeper. "Was Daddy always my daddy?" she asked one evening, eyes wide with the terrifying honesty of a child. Took a breath. "Yes," I said. "But he made some bad choices. And now Mommy takes care of you. Every day. Always." She nodded as if that made sense. "You're the strongest," she said sleepily, and curled into my arms. The days blurred into seasons. Spring melted into summer. The land I inherited bloomed with wildflowers and possibility. I hired a team to help me turn part of it into a retreat space. For writing workshops, women's weekends, quiet healing. The Hartley Grove, we called it. Place to rest. To restore. To rise. One morning, while touring the property with Lila, she tugged at my shirt and asked, "Did you live here when you were little?" "I did," I smiled. "This is where I learned to be brave." She pointed to a tree in the distance. "Can I plant one? Like a lilac tree?" I laughed. "Yes, baby. We'll plant one right there." And we did. That afternoon. Just the two of us, digging a hole in the soft earth, placing a young sapling in the ground. As I watched her pat the dirt with her tiny hands, I felt something unlock inside me, a quiet certainty that I was exactly where I was meant to be. Not just surviving, living. Weeks later, Nathan visited again. He brought Lila a scrapbook he made, a collage of the few photos he'd taken over the past year. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. I watched him kneel down, help her paste a new photo inside. And I saw the faintest light of hope in her eyes. "You're trying," I said quietly when Lila ran off to play. "I am," he nodded. "I know I'll never earn back what I lost. But I want her to know I didn't disappear. She deserves consistency," I said. "I know." And for the first time since everything shattered, I believed him. Still, I kept boundaries. No overnight visits. No shared holidays. Lila had a family. Good one. The one I chose. But I allowed Nathan to show up in the only way he could. On time, honest, trying. Camille, meanwhile, remained a ghost. She sent one more letter, no demands, no apologies. Just a photo of Caleb holding a wooden toy plane. "He made it with his own hands," she wrote. "He's got Grandpa's hands, I think." I didn't write back. But I kept the photo. Because some wounds scar. And some scars remind you that even if forgiveness isn't possible, healing still is. It's been 4 years since I stood alone in that hospital room, shaking with pain and betrayal as the photo of Nathan and Camille seared itself into my memory like a brand. 4 years since I screamed my daughter into the world with a broken heart and empty arms. 4 years since I made a vow to never let anyone tear me apart like that again. And now I sit on the porch of Hartley Grove, watching Lila run barefoot through the field we once played in as kids. Except now it's hers. The past may have scorched the ground, but somehow from that blackened soil, something breathtaking has grown. The retreat has become more than I ever imagined. We host weekend seminars, quiet writing camps, support groups for single mothers and survivors of domestic trauma. Women from all walks of life come here to find something. A voice, a beginning, an ending. And I stand in the center of it all, not as a victim, not as a shattered woman, but as the architect of my own healing. Nina is still my business partner, but now she's also one of my closest friends. We joke that we're co-parenting a business while I parent a child. And in some strange, beautiful way, that's exactly what we've done. Her belief in me never wavered, even when mine did. One evening we sat under the string lights outside the lodge after a long day of workshops. I poured 2 glasses of wine and handed her one. "You know," I said, "none of this would have happened if my life hadn't blown up." She looked at me, eyes steady. "And none of this," she gestured around, the glowing windows, the laughter inside, the field Lila danced in, "would exist if you hadn't rebuilt." Smiled. Not out of pride, but because I knew she was right. As for Nathan, he's still in Lila's life, but now as a steady, muted presence. He doesn't ask for more than he's given. He shows up every other Sunday, takes her to the butterfly garden or brings her books he thinks she'll like. He never oversteps, never asks about us. Maybe he's changed. Maybe he hasn't. But I no longer carry the weight of who he was. That burden isn't mine anymore. Sometimes after he leaves, Lila asks questions. They come in small, uncertain waves. Why did Daddy and Camille stop being friends? Or, why don't we go to Caleb's house? I answer them gently, truthfully, but age-appropriately. I tell her some people make choices that hurt others, and when that happens, we have to decide what keeps us safe. She always seems to understand more than I expect. She knows there's a cousin out there named Caleb. She's seen the photo Camille sent. She asked if she could meet him one day. I told her, maybe, if it ever feels right. But only when you're ready. And I meant it. Because now, every choice I make comes from a place of peace, not pain. Camille has stayed quiet since that last letter. My mother sees Caleb once in a while. Drops off toys or clothes. She tells me he's a bright, thoughtful child who draws airplanes and sleeps with a hand-sewn bear. My father, true to form, has never spoken Camille's name again. For him, family is a bond forged in action, not blood. And as for me, I don't check Camille's social media. I don't reread her letters. I don't linger on what could have been. Because I've learned that closure isn't something you get from someone else. It's the decision to stop needing them to understand what they broke. One rainy afternoon, I sat down with Lila at our old upright piano, one that belonged to my grandmother. She pressed the keys with soft fingers, her head tilted with curiosity. "Mommy, what's your favorite song?" she asked. I paused, then began to play Clair de Lune, slowly, letting the music fill the space between us. "That one," I said. She smiled. "It sounds like the sky at bedtime." And I realized then, Lila would grow up knowing how to describe her feelings with music and color and story. She would never be told to shrink herself for someone else's comfort. She would never have to earn her worth through silence. She would be free. I used to think revenge looked like slamming doors, raised voices, and public reckoning. But now, I know the most powerful kind of revenge is not becoming what tried to destroy you. It's living beautifully, abundantly, loudly, without needing permission. One afternoon, I stood in front of a room full of women at a storytelling workshop. I looked out at the sea of faces, some hardened by pain, others still in the thick of it, and I said, "I'm not here to teach you how to forget. I'm here to remind you that your story isn't over. That pain doesn't get the last word. You do." And as they nodded, scribbling notes, tears shining in the corners of their eyes, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Wholeness. It didn't come from an apology. Came from me. From every morning I woke up when I wanted to disappear. From every night I held Lila instead of bitterness. From every word I wrote, every brick I laid, every boundary I enforced. I wasn't just whole. I was unbreakable. There was a time I thought survival was enough. But I learned that thriving is the real victory. That family isn't who shares your blood. It's who stands beside you when your soul is on fire. My sister stole my husband while I gave birth. She sent me a photo meant to destroy me. And in some ways she did. But what she didn't count on was that I would rise. Not out of revenge, but out of love. For my daughter, for myself, and for every woman who's ever been told to stay quiet. You don't have to forgive to move on. You just have to choose yourself. If this story moved you, share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us your story. Subscribe to Revenge Echoes for more real stories of justice, healing, and strength. And remember, you are not alone. Your voice matters.